When hormones are working properly, life seems to move along as it should. But if there are any kinks in the hormonal system, chaos could closely follow. Anything from overeating or undereating to storing fat, disturbed sleep patterns, or even the inability to feel alert. Hormones control your body and all of its actions. It all starts in your brain with the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands. These glands are constantly sending out and receiving signals that will adjust how much and what type of hormones the organs like your pancreas, your kidneys, adrenal glands, and thyroid will produce. These hormones are what keep your body's internal environment stable, what we call homeostasis. For example, if your blood pressure rises, certain hormones send a signal to your brain that will cause a relaxation of your blood vessels and help bring your blood pressure back to normal. Many times, the same thing happens if you have dramatic changes in your body weight. Your body resists these changes in order to keep your internal system steady. That is, to maintain the body's homeostasis. You can think about the endocrine system as the thermostat of your body. If your house gets too cold or too hot, the thermostat kicks on and controls the temperature. It's the same way with your body, the endocrine system, and your regulatory hormones. The role of your endocrine system is huge. Have you ever heard people say things like, "My thyroid levels are low. That's why I've gained so much weight"? Is it true? Are hormones really to blame for all of your perceived body composition issues? In order to answer those questions, let's rewind. Think about all of the other things your body does for you on a daily basis. Without you even thinking about it, blood continues to pump through your veins and oxygen flows through your lungs. Immune cells help to fight off infection, and the kidneys filter out harmful substances from circulation. And what is the common link between your nutrition, your exercise, and your normal physiological processes and your body composition? The answer is that these processes could not occur without the help of hormones or chemical messengers that act on specific target organs and tissues to help cause cellular responses. And as we've discussed, these responses are essential to help you gain muscle and lose fat. The hormones that initiate these cellular processes are complex and play a critical role in the regulation of metabolism and maintenance of body composition. Your physique and overall health are strongly influenced by certain controllable factors like diet and physical activity. However, some things beyond your control also contribute to body shape and size, such as genetics, your race or ethnicity, sex, and age. In this lecture, I'll talk about hormonal influences on body composition, consider the uncontrollable factors of sex differences and aging changes, and the controllable factors like diet and exercise. There are many different hormones that we can talk about, but this lecture will focus on insulin, cortisol, catecholamines, and the thyroid hormones. There are many hormones that can play a role in your ability to store or burn fat, or make you feel hungry or full. Let's start with one I mentioned earlier, and that you've probably heard of, insulin. Insulin is one of the more commonly known hormones. This is because of the huge prevalence of diabetes in the United States and globally. Insulin acts on the liver, fat tissue, and muscles, and is one of the many hormones required for human growth and development. Insulin's main function is to help regulate blood sugar levels. After you eat and your blood sugar begins to rise, the beta cells of your pancreas secrete insulin, which helps take glucose out of your blood and put it into the cells where it can be stored or used as energy. At the same time, insulin releases signals to your brain that you are fed, and this can act like a satiety signal, which will help you feel full. So insulin is a storage hormone. It wants to store everything. So not only does it store sugar, but it also helps you store fat. When insulin is released, it activates an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, or LPL, which not only moves fat into fat cells for storage, but it simultaneously inhibits lipolysis, or fat breakdown. This is designed so that you have a storage depot to draw energy from during times when you're not eating. Evolutionarily speaking, human beings could not always just walk into a grocery store and buy food when they were hungry. So it really acts as a protection or survival mechanism. Insulin has another role too. It can increase your ability to add muscle mass. This is because insulin-stimulated glucose uptake into muscle cells also enhances muscle protein synthesis by increasing the transport of amino acids into your muscles. So when insulin is released, you essentially go into storage mode rather than burning mode and turn off your ability to use fat as a fuel. Now, let's consider this in relation to what you eat. Very high carbohydrate meals tend to raise insulin levels to the highest level. Also, the glycemic index, or the relative amount that a food raises your blood glucose level, can predict your insulin response. The higher the glycemic index of the carbohydrate, the more it will raise insulin. This acute rise in insulin is normal and really not a problem. Your body handles it, and then blood glucose and insulin will return to lower concentrations. However, if you constantly bombard your system with overloads of high carbohydrate meals, your insulin will always be high. This means that you're likely spending more time in fat storing mode than you are in fat burning mode. If this pattern continues for long periods of time, you may become insulin resistant. This is when your cells don't respond to the insulin well. So your blood sugar is not as well controlled, and your body is forced to produce more and more insulin to have the same impact on reducing your blood glucose levels. So yes, we need insulin, and it is critical to our health and survival. However, it is best to avoid massive swings in insulin concentrations. Instead, aim to keep your insulin levels stable by consuming most of your carbohydrates as vegetables or whole grains. These foods tend to have lower glycemic index values, meaning they don't raise your blood glucose very much when you eat them, compared to sweets, some breads, or juice, which all have higher glycemic index values. Protein and fat can also influence insulin, but not to the same extent as carbohydrates. So it may be beneficial to think about building your typical meal as protein first, good quality fats and vegetables next, and then other low glycemic index carbohydrates. This may seem like a lot to think about, but don't let it stress you out, because next we'll talk about the stress hormone cortisol and the many reasons why it is important to understand. Cortisol, commonly known as the stress hormone, is often blamed for weight gain, poor health, and a slew of other headline-friendly half-truths. But the truth is that cortisol is actually very important to our overall health, helping our bodies to have a healthy response to physical stressors, as well as other life stressors like crying children, deadlines, or even traffic. Cortisol is produced and released from the adrenal glands as part of a complex pathway known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis. One interesting thing about cortisol and many hormones is that it is released according to your circadian rhythm. This means that it follows a pattern based on the time of day. It is highest in the morning to help with wakefulness and to help provide energy after the overnight fast. And it is lowest at night, allowing for rest and recovery. The cortisol that is released in response to normal daily patterns, or even to stress, is actually very useful for us metabolically. It helps us to use our stored glucose, fat, and protein as energy to deal with the stresses we perceive. Additionally, cortisol can temporarily improve brain and immune function to help you overcome a fear, meet a deadline, or try new exercises. Cortisol also helps to decrease inflammation, which is why you might have cortisone injections into knees, wrists, or other problematic areas as you age. In fact, certain autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis have been linked to suppressed HPA axis activity and chronically low cortisol levels. Cortisol has been observed to act pretty fast. After roughly 30 minutes, cortisol will begin to degrade and the HPA axis will stop releasing it. So the cortisol response to an acute stress like exercise is really not long and it's quite useful. Also, cortisol is going to be produced in your body. So even in a theoretical stress-free environment, you would still produce cortisol according to that circadian rhythm. In fact, if you had chronically low cortisol concentrations, there's a good chance you would feel uncomfortably tired and weak. So, how would it become chronically elevated? And is it making you store fat? In the nutrition and fitness world, the perception is that high cortisol equals high body fat. But is this true? Well, we know that in extreme clinical cases, like those who have Cushing's disease, in which cortisol is very high all the time, fat gain is typically seen in the belly or abdomen, in the face and neck. In addition, with chronically high cortisol levels, muscle can be broken down to provide energy. And over time, you see how this would lead to less muscle and more fat. Well, less muscle and more fat is probably not the body composition change that you're going for. So yes, very high levels over a long time can lead to fat storage, particularly in your visceral fat, the fat surrounding your organs. And chronically high cortisol is also linked to psychological factors like depression, anxiety, and grief, and to physical factors like extreme levels of exercise combined with little rest and recovery. In these situations, not only are changes in your metabolism occurring, but your immune system may also become weak. This is why many people associate high stress or extreme exercise over a long period of time with greater occurrence of sickness. Even though exercise and other stressors can temporarily increase cortisol, and cortisol in chronically elevated situations is associated with fat storage, any change in body weight or body fat is probably due to the fact that many people deal with these stresses by eating more and making poor food choices. So don't shy away from physical activity. Normal levels of exercise are not likely to cause chronically high levels of cortisol. In fact, exercise for about an hour a day should help keep cortisol levels within normal ranges. The point is that cortisol must be present in your body. It is extremely helpful metabolically, and even if you are completely stress-free, your cortisol values won't drop dramatically. The issues with cortisol happen when cortisol is chronically elevated. In response to stress, exercise, or a frightening situation, many other hormones can also be released. Two of these hormones are called the catecholamines, and they are important contributors to body composition changes. Let's pretend that you're taking a walk through the woods and a bear jumps out in front of you. In this situation, your body immediately and automatically does something really cool. It prepares you to deal with the situation as best it can. We refer to this as the flight or fight response. In this fight or flight situation, two hormones called epinephrine and norepinephrine will be secreted in high amounts into the blood. These hormones are produced in the adrenal glands, which are positioned on top of each kidney. The adrenal gland is composed of an outer layer called the cortex and an inner layer called the medulla. Epinephrine and norepinephrine produced are from the amino acid tyrosine in the medulla of the adrenal glands. Additionally, norepinephrine can also be produced directly from sympathetic nerve endings throughout your body. Together, epinephrine and norepinephrine are called the catecholamines. They immediately provide glucose from breaking down stored glycogen and fat to your muscles so that you can either fight or run away. These same responses will occur when you begin to ramp up the intensity of exercise. With intense exercise, catecholamines will be released, and you will likely notice that your heart rate and respiratory rate will increase to improve blood flow and deliver oxygen to the organs and tissues. Again, so you can have a better fight or flight response. And catecholamines will also begin to mobilize or break down stored body fat when they interact with specific receptors called adrenergic receptors or adrenoceptors. Adrenergic receptors are receptors that respond specifically to catecholamines. And because exercise and catecholamines both lead to lipolysis or fat breakdown, it is easy to see why exercise can be effective at burning fat as a fuel. If you simply exercise regularly, you take advantage of the catecholamine response that occurs and will lead to the breakdown of fat. But nutrition must also be considered here, along with the type and intensity of exercise being done. For example, a long, slow training session would likely have the lowest catecholamine response. But if you work out intensely with enough fuel to go all out, but not too much that you stop lipolysis, you may have a great recipe for fat burning, in part because you have elevated your catecholamines the most with this type of workout. This is a trial and error process, though. You have to experiment with your food and your workouts. Then you simply adjust accordingly. Remember, too, that if you exercise at an intense level, you may also be setting yourself up to best burn calories even after an exercise bout is finished. This afterburn effect can last from just a few minutes to 24 hours, depending on your exercise intensity. Just like other hormones we've reviewed so far, the thyroid hormones also have a powerful influence on metabolism, body composition, and health. And they may be the most misunderstood hormones when it comes to body composition. How many of you have blamed your weight gain on a faulty thyroid hormone? I've heard this dozens of times, but the truth is that while the thyroid problems can certainly contribute to weight gain or even weight loss, the situations where this is the primary reason for weight change are pretty rare, particularly when considering the excellent advances in medications for diagnosed thyroid problems. The thyroid hormones, as expected, are produced by the thyroid gland, located in the front base of your neck. The two hormones released from the thyroid gland are thyroxine, or T4, and triiodothyronine, which is T3. T4 is produced in greater amounts, but T3 is the more biologically active thyroid hormone within the body. In other words, T3 actually gets the job done. These unique messengers affect most bodily functions and influence nearly every tissue in your body throughout your entire life. Frankly, it'd be easier to discuss what they don't do. In short, the thyroid hormones regulate body temperature and are required for efficient metabolism, normal growth and development, and for the actions of many other hormones. Without normal levels of thyroid hormones and growth hormone, for example, infants and children experience growth and developmental problems. Because the thyroid hormones are involved in many metabolic processes, they also play a role in maintaining and increasing your resting metabolic rate and production of body heat in a process called thermogenesis. Heat production is another process that uses energy and can influence your body composition over time. Many of the bodily functions that thyroid hormones influence expend energy, and we need to replenish that energy by eating. Normally, T3 will increase energy expenditure after we eat, or burn more calories as our food is being broken down and transported to various cells within the body. This can help to regulate weight when thyroid hormones are within a normal range. Now, it's clear that we need to have normal T3 levels to be healthy in a number of ways. Take, for example, a study in which obese individuals reportedly had higher concentrations of T3, increased energy expenditure, and metabolic rate. This correlation may sound odd to you. We just said that T3 increases calories burned. You'd expect people who are obese to have lower concentrations of T3. But this increase in T3 in these obese subjects may be an adaptive response to prevent further weight gain. And T3 may be increased in an attempt to reduce the amount of energy being stored as fat. On the other hand, T3 has been shown to be very low in underweight subjects and during starvation. And this is likely your body's attempt to slow metabolism and conserve energy. These adaptations look like they are in place to reduce fat mass in the obese and preserve or increase fat in the underweight. It is simply a protective mechanism to maintain healthy body weight. Unfortunately, some people do experience chronically low levels of T3 and T4, which is called hypothyroidism. In this circumstance, weight gain is likely. If the opposite occurs and T3 and T4 are chronically high, this is called hyperthyroidism and would likely result in weight loss. Now, I want to mention that in otherwise healthy individuals who are taking synthetic thyroid hormones, your doctor has likely brought your blood levels of T3 and T4 into normal ranges. So, if you're taking medication for diagnosed hypothyroidism or low thyroid, then you don't have your thyroid problem to blame for weight or fat gain anymore. Your levels are normal because of the thyroid medication that your physician has prescribed. As one endocrinologist that I know stated, the rate of obesity does not match the rate of thyroid disorder diagnoses. Your body is perfectly capable of maintaining a healthy body composition with smart exercise and quality nutrition, so long as your thyroid levels are regulated. Now, understanding how hormones, sex, and age influence your body composition is also fascinating. We have known for some time that men naturally have more lean muscle compared to women, while women tend to have more total body fat. This is often explained by the location of body fat and the unique reproductive function needs of women. The higher level of fat and lower level of muscle in women typically means that women have a metabolic rate that's about 5 to 10% lower than men of the same height and weight because muscle mass is more metabolically active. In addition, women are 5 to 8 times more likely to develop hypothyroidism compared to men, which, if not treated, may lead to weight gain. In an interesting scientific paper on sex differences in body composition and insulin resistance, the authors of this review stated that men, who tend to have more fat around their internal organs, were more insulin resistant than women, who tend to store their fat around their arms and legs. So the health consequences of excess fat depend not only on the presence of body fat, but where that fat is located. However, as we age, our hormones also change, and this influences our muscle tissue and fat storage. After menopause, for example, women gain more abdominal fat mass due to the decline in estrogen concentrations. It has also been shown that women burn fat less efficiently after menopause, both at rest and during exercise. The prevalence of hypothyroidism, or underactive thyroid, increases with age too, affecting about 9% of men and women over 60 years old. Now, this may have implications for weight gain in later years because, as you know, a decrease in thyroid hormones slows metabolic rate if it's not treated with medication. Additionally, decreased muscle mass and strength occurs as we get older, resulting from a gradual loss, about 5 to 10% per decade, of the skeletal muscle after age 30. But it's not all doom and gloom. These massive changes to body composition only occur if you choose not to exercise or eat properly. In fact, there is other evidence that shows excellent muscle mass, quality, and function in those who are lifelong exercisers and athletes. We've only scratched the surface of hormones and their influence on body composition and health. However, the hormones we discussed are essential to understand that you have the tools necessary to understand and dispel some common myths about your hormones and the relationship to your body composition. To recap, insulin helps to store glucose and fat. Under stress, cortisol releases stored glucose and breaks down fat and proteins to provide energy. Catecholamines are released in response to stress and exercise to help us mobilize fuel to fight or run away. Lastly, the thyroid hormones help regulate the amount of energy used by the body. Each of these hormones work with and against each other to try to maintain appropriate amounts of fat mass and muscle tissue, as well as to support the skeletal system. Another important fact is that you have hormones signaling that you're hungry or that you're full. For example, leptin, produced from the fat cells, and peptide YY from the intestine, makes you feel full and stop eating. But disruptions in these hormones happen usually with excess sugar consumption and overall food intake. And sometimes, instead of telling you to stop eating, leptin won't do its job properly, and you will continue to feel hungry. You also have hormones like ghrelin, made in the stomach and in the small intestine, and neuropeptide Y from the nervous system that make you feel hungry when they're released. When you consider the entire hormone system, it's clear that we have many different repetitive and redundant ways to regulate our eating, body weight, body composition, and health. And a poor diet, sedentary lifestyle, and chronic stress are all factors that can negatively affect normal function of your hormones, and as a result, your health and body composition. Excluding unavoidable health conditions that may alter the function of hormones, A healthy lifestyle can help maintain and prolong normal hormone effectiveness for an extended period of time. Try this. Limit your intake of added sugars and sugar-sweetened beverages to control your insulin levels, your hunger, and your body composition.